Okay, my name is Mariah Sede, as he said. I am a clinical mental health counselor, and I currently work in private practice alongside my husband, the man with the camera, in our practice, Sede Counseling. Which way do I go? Here we go. Okay, so today I'm going to be talking to you about something that is very near and dear to my heart, and that is disordered eating or eating disorders. So when I say that, people think of a variety of things. They think of whole foods diets, veganism, super picky eating. Ooh. Okay, I'm going to try to project. I do have a scratchy throat, so I'm going to do my best. Yeah, or that ultra healthy person at the gym. So before we dive into the topic, I think it's important that we have a shared understanding of what we're talking about, and preferably a clinical understanding of what we're talking about. So there's no place better to look for a clinical definition of a mental disorder than the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, or the DSM-5. The DSM-5 defines disordered eating as a persistent disturbance of eating or eating-related behavior that results in the altered consumption or absorption of food that significantly impairs physical health or psychosocial functioning. Using a little less jargon, an eating disorder is essentially an ongoing disturbance with eating that harms a physical and or psychological health. Thank you. Okay, so that gives you kind of a cognitive understanding of what an eating disorder is, but I think that we can't really understand disordered eating unless we experience what it's like to live with disordered eating. And so I want to give you an example of one type of disordered eating through an archetype client, Abby. And we're going to go through a day with her. So Abby starts her day at 6 in the morning because she's going to be having breakfast at 9, and she has to get in her intense workout first. So she runs on the treadmill for an hour, lifts weights, and does a cool down stretch. She logs her burned calories before heading home to shower. She never showers at the gym because she's certain that everyone will notice how fat she is. She's a freshman in college, and she's certain she's put on weight. But she doesn't weigh herself because she doesn't want to know. The last time she weighed herself, she was 98 pounds. This was a new low for her, and it scared her, but so did the idea of being any heavier. It's 9 a.m. now, and Abby's at breakfast with her new roommates. She's last to order. She looked at the menu ahead of time to make sure there was something she could eat there, but she still wanted to wait to make sure she didn't order anything more fattening than her friends. Jane gets the French toast with strawberries and whipped cream. Becca gets an omelet with spinach and Swiss cheese. Now it's Abby's turn. I'll get the steamed veggies with egg whites, please, she says. The waitress gives her a sympathetic look. We're actually all out of veggie mix. Can I get you something else? Abby starts to panic. She looks back at the menu, rubs her sweaty palms on her thin thighs, and says, I'll just get scrambled eggs, please. That'll be a lot more calories than steamed veggies, she thinks. I'll make up for it with lunch, she tries to comfort herself. It's 12 p.m. now. Abby sits in her dorm room eating a salad without dressings or toppings. She adds her calories to her calorie counting app again. She smiles. Skipping the toppings has put her back on track. She'll lose those freshman 15 after all. It's 6 p.m. now. Abby eats another salad, this time with an apple. A green apple specifically, because red, pink, and yellow apples are too sweet. That's way too much sugar for Abby. At 10 p.m., Abby's roommates decide to go out for slushies. She considers her options. She doesn't want to miss out, but she can't possibly drink a slushie. Come on, they plead. It's okay, she thinks. I'll just go out and not order anything. In the drive-thru, each girl takes her turn ordering. It's Abby's turn. I'm good, she says. Her roommates fall silent. I can pay for you, one offers. No, I'm not hungry. But they pressure her and she says, okay, sugar-free, please. She adds her calories to her calorie counting app for the 5th time that day. It's now midnight, and Abby's up writing a paper in the dorm lobby. She's tired, stressed, and as you can imagine, starving. Screw it, she thinks. She drives herself to McDonald's and orders everything on the menu that catches her eye. She eats it all rapidly. Now, her stomach hurts. Now, she feels gross, ashamed, and certain she'll be fatter by tomorrow morning. She looks at her phone and thinks of her calorie counting app. Her shoulders slump in defeat. She doesn't add an entry. Abby drives back to her dorm. It's 1 a.m. and all the other girls have gone to bed. She'll make up for her mistake. And she does. She throws up in the bathroom stall, wipes her mouth, and tries to ignore the burn in her throat. She feels relieved that McDonald's can do nothing to her now. But just as soon as she feels satisfied with her empty stomach, she begins to feel a new anxiety, a new shame. I'm so out of control, she thinks. This will be the last time. I promise myself this will be the last time. But Abby's scared it won't be. And for most people, it isn't. Thank you. So what's happening to Abby? In this heartbreaking example, Abby is struggling with anorexia nervosa, binge eating / purging subtype. We can see that her day is filled with anxiety, shame, constant planning, constant preparation, and constant tracking. We see her struggle through the pain of restriction, binging, and purging, and all the complicated and difficult emotions that accompany each. We see her navigate social situations with a stress that only someone who has experienced disordered eating can truly understand. We see her deal with the fear of her own dwindling weight while simultaneously believing that she is fat and must at all costs avoid gaining weight. Abby, while appearing relatively normal on the outside, is stuck in a daily cycle of torture and exhaustion. And this is why I'm so passionate about working with individuals seeking to overcome disordered eating. And this is why I'm so thankful to share this passion with all of you today. Okay, so we just learned about anorexia nervosa, binge eating / purging subtype through our example of Abby. But this is just one of the many, 6 to be exact, forms of disordered eating that the DSM includes. The DSM includes pica, rumination disorder, avoidant / restrictive food intake disorder, anorexia nervosa, bulimia nervosa, and binge eating disorder. And while it's beyond the scope of this talk or this conversation, for me to give you a full definition or all of the diagnostic criteria for each one of those disorders, I will give you a broad strokes idea of what each one includes. So starting with pica, pica is characterized by the consumption of non-food substances. Rumination disorder is the repeated regurgitation of food. This food may be rechewed, reswallowed, or spit out. Avoidant or restrictive food intake disorder is the avoidance of food such that an individual does not meet their caloric and or nutritional needs. Anorexia nervosa is the caloric restriction that leads to body weight that is less than what is considered minimally normal for the person's height, and includes an intense fear of gaining weight. It can also include one or more of the following: a disturbance in the way in which a person experiences their own body, weight, or shape, such as perhaps believing that they're fat when they're in fact not. Their weight unduly affects their self-evaluation, such as having an effect on their sense of self-worth, or they don't recognize the seriousness of how underweight they actually are. Now, there are 2 types of anorexia nervosa. The first includes only restriction and or overexercising, and the second includes binge eating and purging. Next, we have bulimia nervosa. Bulimia includes binge eating, compensatory behaviors to avoid weight gain, such as purging by vomiting or using laxatives, inappropriately using other medications for the purpose of weight loss, such as taking thyroid when it's unnecessary, fasting, or excessive exercise. and the person's self-evaluation is unduly influenced by their body shape and weight. And finally, we have binge eating disorder. This is characterized by eating abnormally large amounts of food within any 2-hour period of time and feeling a lack of control over the binge. It can include very rapid eating, eating until uncomfortably full, eating large amounts of food when not feeling hungry, eating alone due to embarrassment of how much one is eating, and feeling disgusted with oneself, depressed, or very guilty after a binge. So some not so fun facts about disordered eating. The first is that anorexia nervosa has the highest mortality rate of all mental health disorders. This mortality rate is due to starvation and other health complications caused by insufficient nutrient intake, as well as suicide, unfortunately. As seen in Abby's one-day snapshot, living with an eating disorder is truly miserable. And some people feel that the only way to escape that misery is to take their own life. Second, because eating disorders are high risk, many clinicians choose not to work with them, and so they refer clients out, causing a barrier to care. Third, due to the shame and fear of judgment and/or bodily changes, many clients struggle to ask for help to begin with. Fourth, anorexia and bulimia affect females 10-1 compared to males. And fifth, bulimia most commonly sets in during late adolescence and early adulthood. So now we have a better idea of what a person might be experiencing if they're living with disordered eating. But what in the world is causing this? Well, there are several different layers or levels at which to look at disordered eating. The surface level is an understanding that social media, peer pressure, popular culture all have an impact on body image. And it is true that these things have a profound impact on people, particularly young people who have yet to develop a sense of self or an internalized sense of value that is separate from any sort of external measurement of worth. But taking this a little bit deeper, you'll see that a person struggling with disordered eating is striving for control. When people feel that their life is so entirely outside of their control, they look for something that they can control, something that nobody else can take away from them. That's their body oftentimes. And so this leads them to fiercely control their own bodies. Unfortunately, this need for control is where many treatment providers stop. But a more transformational and deeper way to address disordered eating is to ask, what is beneath that need for control? What is causing this deep and desperate desire to control? And this brings us to enmeshment. And this is a tough topic to talk about, especially with parents. And so I want to do it really respectfully and also to provide hope. So enmeshment is a relationship that is too close for comfort. The person in the enmeshed relationship doesn't know where they stop and the other person begins. This is, typically speaking, a parent, and most commonly the mother. And it typically is because the parent, with good intentions, struggles to allow the person, the client or the person struggling with disordered eating, to think for themselves, make their own decisions, and as difficult as it is, to make mistakes and then experience the consequences of those mistakes. Now, again, I don't love saying this because there are a lot of parents in here and nobody loves you like your mama, right? So I want to provide some hope. If you have the power to hurt in some ways, you also have the power to heal. And all it is a little shift, because that mama bear nature can also be used to help empower your child to grow and overcome disordered eating. So I want you to know that. Finally, in addition to enmeshment, I've noticed that in my own work with clients, people struggling with disordered eating often have a history of trauma in their background. And this makes sense, right? Because if you've experienced trauma, for instance, you've lost a loved one, there's nothing you can do about that. That's very disempowering. Or other forms of trauma, they make you feel powerless oftentimes. Now for a little hope and positivity. Eating disorders can be treated. Now, if I had all day, I would happily nerd out and tell you all the nitty-gritty details of how I, as a therapist, would help someone overcome disordered eating. Unfortunate for me, and probably fortunate for you, we don't have all day. So I will give you a broad view of what treatment can look like. And if you're interested in learning more, visit us over at that table. We do have a podcast, and I put together this slide deck. I delivered it to my sister, and she said very lovingly she will give me honest feedback. Mariah, you need to tell them how they can help their loved ones, not how you're going to help their loved ones. And I was like, oh, okay, good point, Grace. Touche. So I'm going to do a podcast on how I can help your loved ones, but today I'm going to tell you how you can help your loved ones. So with that said, these are some key elements of treatment that I think are very applicable to interpersonal relationships. So this is something that a counselor would do. We'd do more things and we'd go more in depth, and I can tell you more about it. But in a broader sense, so that you guys can more easily apply this is what we do. We eliminate shame. So we approach the person with compassion, not judgment. We empathize by entering into the person's emotional experience. We empower them through strengths or through focusing on their strengths. And we understand that what they're going through is a coping mechanism, and we help them to understand that too. Why? Because this externalizes it. It's not a part of them. It's something they're doing to cope with life. And that means that they can cope in a different way. And that means it's not a part of them forever, so they can overcome it. We can also provide a paradigm shift. What was a means of gaining control is now controlling them. So what does that mean for a person who likes control? Getting your control back means overcoming the eating disorder. It works really well. We can help the person to apply baby steps in thinking healthier, tolerating emotions, and adjusting their behavior. The baby steps is super important because if you go too far too fast, you're setting your client up for failure. We don't want that. And then we can normalize setbacks in order to combat all or nothing thinking. I really liked what Allie said. She said, if you fail once, okay, just don't let it happen twice, right? So the way that we respond to the setback is what's important. It's not the fact that they had a setback to begin with. Additionally, we as clinicians can help to facilitate individuation. We can do this by emphasizing the client's authentic self, their thoughts, their beliefs, their feelings, their values, their experiences, their preferences, and their boundaries. We can help to draw these things out, to honor them, to value them, to respect them, and that helps them to come into their own. And eventually, as they learn to do that in relationship with us, they will start to apply this to their other relationships, and that can help them to individuate as a person. Man, I'm not that great with this clicker, guys. Oh, maybe so. Thank you, I appreciate that. Okay, so I hope that this was helpful for you all. I really appreciate you listening. I hope that you have a better understanding of what disordered eating is, what it looks like in a person's life, and how you can come alongside a loved one who may be struggling with disordered eating. If you remember nothing else from this presentation, I hope you will remember these 3 words: compassion, empathy, and empowerment.